Welcome, AXA family, to Common Purpose, Uncommon Times. My name is Wesley Smith, and I'm proud as always to serve as your executive director. Got a great broadcast tonight. Ron Nocetti from CIF is going to talk about their newly adopted plan for sports, not just in the fall, but sports this coming school year. As you know, we've been focusing pretty much every night for the last several weeks on reopening strategies, and certainly sports, and extracurricular activities are a huge part of schooling, on student engagement, and a big factor in reopening plans. So we're excited to have Ron with us tonight. Before we jump into that, though, a couple of announcements to make you aware of. Our AXA campus tour tomorrow at 10 a.m. has Superintendent Amy Alzina, friend of AXA, great superintendent down in Santa Barbara County. She'll be doing the campus tour tomorrow. And then the legislative lunch break is Wednesday at 1, and that's going to be Alex Perry from Foresight Law in D.C. They're the advocacy group that we've had a contract with for 6 years now, I think. And they do daily advocacy for us at the federal level. Just so you know, AXA covers you here and in D.C. as well. But they're going to be talking about some funding and how you may have access to that funding and some other items from DC. Again, excited to hear them this Wednesday. We didn't get a chance last week to really dive into much the CDPH guidelines relative to school reopening because we had panelists. We knew the topic was going to go over, and it did by about 10 minutes. And so we didn't do too much. I did want to say that related to those guidelines, just know that we continue to fight for greater clarity and more support for you at the local level. Look, we applaud the governor for really trying to depoliticize this issue by making statewide determinations. We've said since the beginning of this that we needed the state to say, these are the science and public health standards. You folks are amazing at all the things you do, but you shouldn't be expected to be public health experts. And so we've asked the state to make these determinations, which we hope depoliticizes the issues for you a bit. You've heard me mention before, I'll say it again because it demonstrates how important this topic is. But we have leaders around the state receiving death threats for suggesting that students were going to wear face masks, amongst other things, in the fall. And so the state stepped up and they did make some declarations about things like face masks. And then when it was safe for schools to be open, and what were those things, those metrics that would keep schools closed physically. And so while we applaud the governor and his team doing so, there are still some areas we need to work out. We think about the first one, and while it probably makes the most sense of all of them, that if your county is on the CDPH county watch list for COVID data, positive tests, rates, hospitalization, multiple metrics that they use, that you'll need to open virtually 100%. But there are counties where there are different data sets because you might have a more urban environment and a very, very rural district as well. And so how do we account for the disparity within the county? We think that ought to be something that folks have an opportunity to do so that we're using local data and the decisions and interest of stakeholders locally to decide how best to educate our students and when it's safe to return physically. So there's some clarity there. The issue of the 5% positivity rate is really confusing because it's 5% of what? It's not defined. We were on a call with Linda Darling Hammond last week, and it was her opinion that it's 5% positivity rate for students and staff. So a combination thereof, 5%, and the school would need to close. But when we were on a call with the governor's office, they didn't have the same interpretation that it was 5% of students and staff, and even suggested it could be 5% of students or staff. And who does the testing? How do you get the data? They're saying that public health will do the testing and then they'll send the data to you. But now you're dependent upon someone else giving you the data to make these decisions. It doesn't seem like it'll be that easy to do. And then it gets really confused with this issue of cohorts. It's 5% positivity rate or multiple cohorts. Now you're out there thinking, as I've heard you say, well, it's student cohorts, right? Grade levels, subject areas. If we split the school into 2 cohorts, do a split schedule, that's what we're talking about. You could make that argument, but it's not defined. It could be cohorts within the employee group, cohorts of teachers or teachers certificated and classified. We don't know what that cohort is. And so as you are trying to, above all else, keep students and adults safe, faculty safe, your employees safe, and your communities, it would be nice to have some clarity around that. What is a cohort? 5% of what? Who does the testing? How are you going to be guaranteed to get the data in a timely fashion so you can make those decisions? So again, we're grateful that the governor stepped up and that CDPH put these out. Step in the right direction, but we need some clarity. We're going to keep working on your behalf with regard to that clarity. Another big topic has been the waiver for elementary schools. It's been a big topic of conversation. We're waiting for guidelines on that waiver from CDPH. And then the topic comes up, well, if elementaries can get a waiver, can we get a waiver for small groups? Remember last week we talked about students with disabilities, students with severe disabilities, and how they may not be served distance learning remotely, that they might need to be served in person. And so how do we get waivers for that? And Linda Darling-Hammond did say those are 2 different things. One is a waiver for elementary schools, and another is for how do we do small groups? It could be English language learners or, as I said, students with severe disabilities. So we need to get some clarity for you around that, and we'll continue to ask these questions. And then this issue of testing staff, that's a big one. How does that work? Some counties, my friend Paul Gothold in San Diego County, they're getting pretty close to having a plan where they might be able to test folks on campus. Well, that would be great. But for all those other places where that won't work, when does it get done? Again, they say that healthcare providers will pay for it. But what about some of those employee groups that aren't within the healthcare plan? Campus security, yard duty, those kinds of positions, if they're not in your healthcare program. Who pays for it? Do we pay mileage? All those things that are going to end up, coming up and forcing you, to go to the table and figure these out with your labor allies. And so we'd like some clarity around testing as well. So again, good news is the state cleaned up some of that language, made some determinations we've been asking them to make, that you've been asking them to make. It doesn't go far enough, so we're going to keep pushing on your behalf. Hey, let's jump into tonight's topic. As we talk about reopening schools, we certainly have to be thinking about co-curricular, extracurricular activities. Sports are huge throughout the country, but certainly here in California as well. Ron Nocetti is the executive director of CIF, the California Interscholastic Federation. We're very, very grateful to have him and look forward to just sharing a little time with him tonight. But Ron, I just want to say again, and you've heard me say this, these engaging activities are essential for public education, in my opinion, and I think in the opinion of many of our members. And while the engagement can come through a lot of co and extracurricular activities, the arts, etc., these are all powerful, but so are sports. In fact, I wouldn't have gone to school were it not for sports. I was raised most of my life by a single mom who certainly identified the importance of school, and she had us do our work. But the only reason I went was because I wanted to be a right-handed Kenny Stabler, right? I wanted to play for the Raiders and have long flowing gray hair out the back of my helmet. I wanted to win every game in the last 2 minutes. But then I never grew. I was slow and I didn't have much of an arm. So sports didn't work out for me. And by the time I learned that, heck, I all of a sudden liked school, and it worked out. I know there are a lot of students who are like that. And so they're important. The work that you do is important. The work that CIF does is important. So let's start with this. Let's give some context to the field. CIF, it's a big federation. About how many sports and how many students are involved in sports in California?
Absolutely. First, Wes, thanks for having me today. It's a pleasure to speak to you, and ACTS is a great partner of the CIF. So any information we can provide your membership, we're happy to do so. The CIF has, to put it into some perspective, the CIF has over 1,600 member schools, and we have well over 800,000 student athletes in our state. Give you some perspective, the NCAA in its totality in Division 1, 2, and 3 have about 1,100 member schools and 460,000 student athletes. So it's a large organization. That's why we're separated. We have 10 geographic sections. Our section commissioners have done a great job throughout this whole process, along with our Associate Executive Director, Brian Seymour, in establishing the plan that we're going to talk about tonight. And they've shown incredible leadership throughout.
No, wow. That's staggering. I knew that it was big, but bigger than the NCAA, by a third. That's impressive. You mentioned the plan. We want to get to that, but before we get to the plan, which you recently adopted and shared with the field, what were the considerations that you and your board or your leadership were noodling, were diving into? What were you thinking about as you tried to make the best decision for the safety of students and adults?
Well, I think the goal from the start, we've been in this situation since March when we had to cancel our state basketball championship, and then we got to the position where we had to cancel all of our championship events for the spring. And so since that time, again, they've been working together to come up with a plan moving forward. The goal was to start on time, and I think probably. In hindsight, maybe we didn't know we were ever going to get there. But back in May, it looked like it was a possibility. And then as we started to see numbers change come June, late June, early July to now, I think it came to the realization that we needed to start looking at other models and looking at what we could do. And the goal was to provide the most sport opportunities for the most student athletes as possible. And then also to give them as much of a complete season as possible so that they could experience, the preseason and their league and some postseason if we're able to do that. And so I think those were the goals in the plan we move forward. And then I think it all became crystallized when the governor made the statement that if schools or school districts were on the watch list, that they couldn't open in person. That kind of crystallized it, as I said, for us, because at that time, when he made the announcement, I know there was well over 80% of our state population were involved in schools on the watch list. And not every student in our state can get to campus every day to be in practice, to participate in contests if they're not in school. And, there's going to be a lot of moms and dads out there that both have to work. And whether it's mom, dad, grandma, grandpa who cares for the students, they may have to care for younger siblings. And so we wanted to make sure that what we did was in the best interest of all of our students. And also we wanted our school districts to be able to focus, our school districts and schools to focus on returning to the educational model. And then sports, they're going to eventually return. And, whether it's in our current plan or our plan that we have to look at down the road, we will have high school sports.
Yeah, right on. And you know what? Thank you, by the way, for framing it, student athletes. Shame on me for not, because we're all about educating. I certainly am talking about the power of engagement, engaging through these other activities. So hopefully there is a benefit in the classroom. But thank you for calling that out. And I couldn't agree more that Memorial Day did us no favors in California. We seemed to maybe rush to reopening the economy, and people just went out and behaved irresponsibly, quite honestly. And so we've seen the data just spike, and not even spike because we haven't seen it flatten out yet. I mean, it continues to grow. And so we totally get it. Where we were focused on, hey, maybe we can open, if we're funded well enough, most districts should be able to open physically, safely in the fall. And then the data just changed. So we totally get that. And, you mentioned closure, and I have to brag about my folks here. It was in the spring when you were canceling the basketball season, and right before you did, Chris Hoffman in Elk Grove had a case. And so they didn't cancel the game, but they postponed it. And he took so much heat from the community over that. And he was telling them, look, it's not safe for us to bring the student athletes together. It's not safe for us to fill up a gym. We've got to see where this is, and we can play it another time. And about, within a week, a CIF, NCAA, NBA, MLS, they all cancel their seasons. And so, our leaders out there are doing the best they can with variables that change and dynamics that change daily.
Well, absolutely. And I think to jump in there, I think you're absolutely right. And I think our school leaders and our school districts, our superintendents, principals, athletic directors, from top down, they're making decisions. And what we're trying to explain to people is we know we're not giving you all the decisions that you want to hear, but we are all giving you the decisions that we feel are the most responsible decisions to make at this time. And I don't think anyone can doubt that our school leadership is doing the same thing.
No, right on. Well said. So let's hear it. You'd been talking to several of our groups. You've been a regular at AXA. Thank you, by the way. And you're talking about how things might look. Well, now there's a plan. So what is the plan for sports this coming school year?
Well, we took our model, which is normally 3 seasons, fall, winter, and spring, and we split our sports into 2 seasons, which is different than what I think most were expecting. Very similar. I think our junior college system did an excellent job in taking on a very similar model, and we looked at theirs in developing ours as well. Our goal is to start, and when we get to the months of December, January, and to play what we're still calling our fall season, and to give a full slate of games as much as possible, regular season, postseason. All the section playoffs should be able to be played in their entirety if we can start playing at that time. And then we reduced our state playoffs. So all state and regional playoffs would be moved to 1 week because, we want to make sure our sections get through their full slate of playoffs. And then we move into our spring season. And there's a lot of sports in the spring season. And that's where, if there's one decision that we made that none of us wanted to make was to overlap sports like that, because we definitely want multi-sport athletes. But we also knew that, if we did 3 distinct seasons, the overlap for facility use and otherwise would have been incredibly difficult. It's still going to be, but we felt this was the best plan moving forward.
Yeah, and I think I've heard you say before that there are clearly some sports you just really couldn't do at the same time. What were those variables you looked at where you said, hey, look, football can't be played at the same time as X because so many of the athletes, are the same?
Right. I think where you start out is football and soccer for facility use is obviously very difficult. Water polo and swimming, separating water polo and swimming, separating cross country and track. Separating volleyball and basketball for gym use and gym facilities. And so because of that, we had to put some sports together where the boys and girls normally play in different seasons are now in the same season, like we've always had for our traditional seasons of basketball. So you're going to see in some parts of our state, boys and girls water polo are going to play at the same time. Boys and girls volleyball are going to play at the same time. Very different. And what's been really encouraging is seeing parts of our state. There was an article in Orange County where they interviewed the coaches who have always had separate seasons for boys and girls water polo. And the coaches have been great. They said, hey, this is going to give us an opportunity for our boys and girls teams to support each other during the same season and to play some double headers with our boys and girls water polo teams, which we've never done before at the high school level. So I think that's how we're all looking at this is there's great challenges ahead for our schools. And we know that. But we appreciate the fact that our schools are trying to look at this as what are the opportunities that can come of these challenges?
Yeah, and I think we've demonstrated historically that the students can handle it. Look how many of our students are involved in a school activity and then some other activity after school. It seems like they're always going from one thing to the next, even within the same year. So I think we've demonstrated we can do it.
Absolutely. When you look at our student athletes, there's plenty of studies out there that show they have better GPAs, they miss less school, and they have less disciplinary referrals. And I'm sure that's the same when you go to any co-curricular program, whether it's, as you mentioned earlier, music programs, drama programs, the arts. We believe all co-curricular, extracurricular programs are important, and the students work hard because they know that they can't play sports unless they maintain their grades.
Yeah, no, that's great. You're right. Staying busy. My mom used to call it idle hands, right? Yep. People would say, "Oh, you're just a do-gooder." No, I was always too busy to get in trouble. I'd love to get into trouble, but I was too busy playing sports and other things. Hey, folks out there, again, if you have questions for Ron, put them in the chat. We'll paste them here, and we'll give him a shot at answering to the best of his or our ability. So put your questions in the chat. I wanted to kind of humanize this for folks out there, because we sometimes forget that the people making the decisions are absolutely affected by the decisions, right? I can tell you, every time I'm on a call at the governor's office, my son is kind of leaning in, listening, like, what does this mean for me? And Ron, this has affected your family. Why don't you talk about your daughter for a second, and how she's had multiple disruptions in her athletic career?
Yeah, I have a daughter that's going to be a high school senior. She's a water polo player and also swims. And her sophomore year is when we had the wildfires, and we moved our Northern California regional championships for water polo. Our school was fortunate enough to qualify, and we must have moved that to 3 different locations. And every time we'd move it, the wildfire, the smoke would blow into a different area, and it came to the point in time where we had to just cancel the event. And so that happened her sophomore year for her and her teammates, and now 2 years later, they're experiencing something at a whole different level that I don't think any of us could ever have envisioned. And it's so impressive, though, the way that the students are handling this and finding ways to stay connected to each other and to their programs, because they need sports, and we know the importance of sports for them, and they're finding ways, and that's what's been so impressive with our schools, is how they've found ways to stay connected to their students during this time, knowing that they need that outlet. Yeah,
that's been a recurring theme on this and all of our broadcast connections with members, that we need to support socially, emotionally, our young people and our adults, right? And next week we're going to be talking about social emotional supports, and we're trying to put something together on PTSD as well, because folks are struggling out there, and we know that if students can get back to doing some of these things that they're passionate about, they're comfortable with, that will certainly support their mental wellness as well as their physical well-being, but the mental as well. The emotional.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that I think our section commissioners got really creative with, and what we're going to allow is, let's say that things change for the better sooner than any of us think, and we are able to get back to some form of activity, whether it's conditioning, training, sports themselves, a little earlier than our season's planned to start. We gave our sections the ability to work with their schools and extend their summer period time, so that normally in the summer, if a school principal or their designee allows, the teams can play in certain activities and sports in their school uniforms. And so we could treat the months of now through first contest in December as the summer period, so that the students can have a lead up to our traditional sports season. So we have a mechanism in place for them to get back out there once we're allowed to do so. But ultimately, just like our schools, we're going to follow the guidance of the governor's office and the Department of Education and the California Department of Public Health, because it has to be health and safety at the forefront.
Yeah, right on. You just mentioned that, hey, and if we can, get to this sooner, your plan has some adaptability, some nimble nature to it, right? But we also know it could go the opposite direction, right? So we saw today the Florida Marlins had several cases. We've just opened up, MLB, and people were watching it all weekend. And now they're wondering about, what will those cases mean? Will it slow it down? So as you look at the metrics out there, what will you be studying? What do you worry about that could maybe, throw a wrench in this system that you've designed?
Well, I think the biggest thing we worry about is that as we see right now, as much as people are out there imploring people to wear a mask and practice social distancing and practice the appropriate hygiene and to not mix within families at gatherings, we still see a lot of it going on. And I think our biggest concern is that if we don't all get on the same page to work together, that none of this will come to fruition. And I think that's what's so important for all of us to realize. And I think that's where I think our schools have been so receptive to the plan we put forward is they just wanted a plan. That's, if you look, that's what educators do from school districts to school sites. They adapt and adjust on a daily basis. And so they wanted a plan. They wanted to know what the plan is, and then let them go ahead and get creative of how to implement it in their local areas. And they're doing that. And it would really be a shame if we can't all get on the same page and do these things as a society and to be good citizens, that this may not happen for any of us.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. When I'm out on my walks with my mask, doing my social distancing, I see a lot of people who aren't. And it's frustrating. Hey, we've got some questions rolling in, which is really cool. Ryan Reboller, and Ryan, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, my friend. Here's a question, Ron. During the fall season, would incoming freshmen who are under the age of 14 as of July 31st be able to play for their youth football association? And should the associations be allowed to play? I know you've been talking about that. And then would those freshman football players be allowed to play in the new season, December to March?
Well, I think first and foremost, in our conversations with the California Department of Public Health, there's no youth sports of any kind that should be existing right now in playing. And we know that there's going to be forthcoming guidance on that. Club sports outside the high school season of sport are the prerogative of families. The question that this gentleman's asking is a very good one. And it's one we've never had to answer before because obviously we're playing high school football. I think that's a discussion we would have with our 10 sections. The one thing I would caution is making sure that we're putting as much information out there as possible about, playing tackle football in the months of July through November, then playing tackle football in the months of December through March, and then coming back and playing tackle football again next August through November. That's what's best. And I think those are the issues I think that speak more to that question on people having to make those decisions.
Yeah, that's a great point. I hadn't thought about that. Great point. In that same vein, Richard Lenzo asked, how can we field teams reliably, safely, right? How can we do that? In pro sports, you're seeing bubbles, for heaven's sakes, right? I mean, that's on the one extreme. Others, and in college, it's just a lot of testing, a lot of social distancing where you can. But tackle football is tackle football. So is it possible to keep folks safe without a vaccine on these teams?
Well, I think that's the unknown. And I think it's unknown for anyone. I think anyone that says they know exactly where we're going to be come December, January, given the fluidity of the situation. So I completely understand the question. And I think that question is what led us to say, is it right for us to continue down the road of trying to play in the fall when our schools are just trying to get back into the classrooms, and how can we do this in a healthy and safe manner? So I think that question is what led us down the road to delaying. And then, we will probably start working again shortly here on what plans do we have moving forward if we can't, do this in December, January. There has to be contingency plans for that as well.
No, that's well said. All right, so this is a really, really important question from a guy named Wes Smith. So are we gonna have a college football season in the fall, or are they gonna follow your lead once again in the NCAA?
Well, I'll tell you what, the NCAA is an organization that is doing everything right medically. They have a strong medical team in place. we've had the ability to listen to webinars from some of the leaders that are assisting them in making the decisions. And just like we're doing, the NCAA is doing the same. They're following the advice of the medical experts. And for us, those medical experts are the people involved in the California Department of Public Health. I think the NCAA has some advantages, obviously, high schools aren't going to have, and that's just simply being able to pay for tests. I mean, I've heard all kinds of different numbers, but I've heard as much as every student athlete must be tested at least the day before, 2 days before, maybe 3 days before every game. Well, if the tests are $100 each, and you have 3 football teams at the high school level that are having to do something like that, you can imagine the expenses. The universities out there can maybe do that, and I think that's why they're hanging on as long as they can.
Yeah, we each week we try to finish with something that promotes hope, right? We look for the silver linings. We reframe the crisis into an opportunity. I certainly gain hope by groups like yours, the Federation, making sound decisions like this. I love sports. I don't know how in the high school environment you keep our student athletes safe in the fall without a vaccine, with the numbers that we're currently seeing. We don't have the ability to test as often, the contact tracing and all of that. We just don't have the resources that universities and sports teams, pro sports teams have. And so I know this wasn't easy for you, but when I heard what you had decided, I just thought, hey, people are paying attention, and we're not telling our students they're not going to have the chance. They're just not going to have it in the fall, unless things, turn around very, very quickly, and miracles do happen. And we know again that our student athletes, it doesn't COVID-19 necessarily affect them as severely, but they can share that with other family members for whom that's not true. I've got a pre-existing heart condition, which pushed me on that list of stay in your house and don't go out. And our student athletes have relatives like that as well. So I'm grateful for your group doing what I think, my opinion, the right thing for the health and safety of our communities at this time. Let me ask you this to close out. What gives you hope? What gives you hope?
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. And again, all the credit goes to our section commissioners did a great job putting this forward. And I'm just privileged to be part of that group. What gives me hope, one thing we've seen is a lot of comments out there that this is going to be what destroys high school sports, and people aren't going to come back to high school sports. And, that's just not going to happen. High school sports are so unique to the fabric of our state and the entire country. It is really where you get to participate, where it's all about your team and it's all about your community and playing in front of your family and friends and your classmates, and not just in front of a few people in folding chairs. So I think that's what gives me hope, is that when high school sports returns, it's going to be an incredible experience. And I can't wait to go experience that first time, where there's kids in a pool again, kids on a track again, being at a cross country meet, being at a football game. That's what gives me hope. And we're going to get back to that. Does anyone know exactly when? Our plan lays out some dates, and that's our hope. But we know that we'll also adapt and adjust if we get to that point and we can't do it in a healthy and safe way. But high school sports will be back, and I think they're going to be back stronger than ever when they come back.
Well said, Ron. Ron Nocetti, thank you so much for yet again taking time for AXA. I know you had meetings tonight that you had to reschedule so that you could be a part of this. And on behalf of our 18,000 members, I just want to thank you. And to all of you out there in the field, thank you for what you're doing every day to provide for your students, your adults, your communities, for all the tough work around reopening. Thank you for everything you do. Remain hopeful, stay safe, be well. We'll see you next Monday night on Common Purpose, Uncommon Times. Thanks, everybody.